Hey guys, welcome back to Swiftly Customs, and in this one, I'm going to take on a challenge that one of you left in the comments below. So the first thing I did was I started going through some of the extra walnut that I had been saving for more projects in the future, and I'm actually making a desk out of the same slab. But as you can see, I'm kind of just figuring out what I have to use. This 8/4 stuff, it's really good quality, had a lot of curl, a lot of figure in it. And I was really kind of just not sure what I wanted to make. So I started scrolling through a lot of the shops on Etsy and seeing a lot more of the modern traditional bases that were already made out of steel, and started seeing maybe what I really wanted to make. I did come across this base on one of the shops, which was a spider base or crisscross. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that the middle of it had this diamond. So the next thing I did was I went on actual just paint and just printed off a diamond to use as a template to draw out where I needed to cut out that center piece to pivot my legs off of. Now this isn't something that, is really hard to do. You just have to be able to get your shape, and as you can see there, cut out a pretty big chunk of it. But from here again, I'm not a big instruction guy. I'm not someone that can just read like step-by-step stuff and really go through it and actually feel like I'm accomplishing anything. I kind of like not knowing the end result when it comes to my projects like this, where it's kind of just all on me. There's no client, there's nobody expecting anything else besides just having the freedom to build what I want. And from here, I started cutting the legs, and I used the first one as a template for the rest of them. That way all four of them were going to match. So my next step was using the center diamond as a template to figure out where my legs were going to lay and how they were going to pivot off the centerpiece. The initial way I was going to attach this was just going to be using wood dowels and glue. But my initial problem after I put this together was realizing that it was going to have edge grain and end grain as a glue joint. And if you do any kind of woodworking, you know that end grain to edge grain or face grain is very weak. And I didn't want to put this together and eventually sell it and have this piece end up getting a phone call later on of it not being together anymore or it collapsing. But the dowels did help in, again, that initial dry fit. I don't think that you would be able to align this in any other way. I also would recommend, if you do have the access to a domino joiner, I would definitely recommend that, just so you can get that initial lineup the way you want it. Another thing that I shouldn't have done was I should have just glued up 2 legs at a time to be able to have that pressure that I needed when I did the wood glue. And I ended up having to go back and actually doing wood screws and plugging my holes with wood from the slab as well. But you can see here that the dry fit went really good, and I should have pre-sanded a lot of this, and it went to where I had to go back and do a lot of more extra work to do the sanding that it needed to be sanded up to. I only sanded up to 150, knowing that, again, most of the time when it comes to these bases, people don't have their hands on them. But in finer woodworking and finer furniture, you still want to spend the time and the extra credit basically to make those a little bit more finer details to where, again, your pieces stand out again against someone else's or a big box store piece. And in any kind of custom work, you're going to want, again, to make sure that every little detail is finished to the best quality that you can do. And with making this base, it was kind of a challenge just to myself for getting away from doing the traditional just metal steel table legs and having something to where I could be like, okay, I've pushed myself a little bit farther in my woodworking skills to see what all I can make. So after the glue had cured, I began sanding everything up to what I wanted to, again, to 150. I initially, again, began doing hand sanding and realized that this was going to take a lot longer And I skipped a lot of the sanding just because, again, it did take a quite bit of time to sand everything up to what I wanted to finish it off of. And you can see if you take a closer look that those wood dowels are actually plugs for the wood screws that are attaching the piece to the center. Then from there, I began filling up all the small cracks and minor defects with this thin CA glue from Starbond. Again, I don't use the medium or the thick when it comes to these slabs or these bases, just because it doesn't actually penetrate the way I want it to. I want it to seep down to those cracks, those holes, or those knots, to get down and actually make a little bit better seam or seal. And you can see here as I sanded down to it that you can still kind of see where the crack was, but once you put the finish on, you won't notice those. And when you start, again, with making furniture, or if you're making something for yourself, or just making a name in any of your products, you want to make sure that you do all these little things that set yourself apart and not skipping the steps that actually are going to make a big difference in the hobbyist and the person who's actually wanting to make a truly one-of-a-kind piece. So my next step was just attaching these mounting plates, and I just ordered these off of Amazon. You can get these mounting plates for pretty cheap. I wouldn't recommend going on anywhere else to buy them, especially for something you're not going to see. You want to try and, again, make the piece, again, really nice. But for this kind of stuff, I'm going to recess these plates to where you don't see them anyway. But they came out really well. Now, the next step was to get everything finished with this Rubio Monocoat. I didn't have a top really picked out for this yet. I had a piece of oak off that slab in the background you could see that I initially cut into a round tabletop. But speaking to my wife and looking at it, she was just saying that it was too big. It really didn't fit the piece well. So I was kind of in limbo for a little bit until I figured out really what I wanted. But the finish came out really, really nice. Again, this piece had tons of curl, tons of figure, and you can see those plugs that I used to cover up the wood screws. And again, I did my best to try to figure out, again, color-wise, to try and hide them. It's, again, with custom pieces, you're always going to struggle with making it absolutely perfect, but I think it turned out really nice. So my next step was actually, again, going to look for a top, and luckily I'm pretty close to some guys here close to Rockwall, Texas, that have access to a lot of this cool black walnut, and these guys at Redeem Lumber are always great to work with. They flattened everything up, and this piece had a ton of feathering in it. It wasn't from a crotch actual slab, but it looked like a limb coming from the crotch section. So I got the slab back to the house and began cleaning up all the live edge on this slab. As I was working through it, I noticed that there was a small section of rot in the bottom of the slab that was going to be the bottom of it anyway. But I didn't want to go back and use any more epoxy in the actual wait time, since I did have a couple of projects I still have to finish for clients. And as you can see, I'm pointing out that I'm going to follow this grain pattern to cut a faux live edge section. If you do have to do this, this is what I'd recommend. If you have to fake a live edge, the best thing you can do is just follow that grain, follow the curls, follow the roundness of it, so that way you can at least make it look like it's continuous throughout the entire piece. And this is not something that I love doing. This is something that I didn't want to have to do initially, but I think it turned out really, really nice. But again, for when you see a lot of products out in the world, when you start seeing this faux live edge stuff, I hate it, just because if you look at it and you can see all that area where it doesn't look like it's natural. But again, if you do have to do this, follow the grain, go back with your sander, and just let it kind of just flow with the sander. That's the best way I'm going to recommend for you doing this, so that way you can get a piece that looks like it's all continuous. So as I was working through my sanding process, I began with 80. Even though this went through a helical head planer, I still start at that low grit, so that way each time I go through my next sanding process, I'm feeling all those minor defects and cracks properly. You can start higher if you go through some of those nicer planers, or again, if you have access to a wide belt sander. but you're going to still have those sanding marks or those lines from a planer. And it's better for you to go back, use the lower sanding grits, and then move up slowly. That way you can take care of all the small things that, again, are going to set those pieces apart. And my next step was just recessing these mounting plates. Again, this is not something that you have to do, but if you want to just take that extra step in making a piece really high quality, go back, recess those legs. That way it's going to sit more flush, and that way all that hardware is hidden. So after water popping everything, I got everything sanded up to 220. And as I started working on this faux live edge section, I actually went back with a wire wheel to basically, again, fake the feel of where a live edge section may feel like it's more roughed up. But going over it with this 220 sanding disc, it actually gave it a pretty good feel to where at least it made it feel like it was all part of the live edge. And applying this Rubio monocoat, this slab was really dry. It did take a lot of extra oil to make it actually saturate the piece, but it had tons of gray and black in it. Again, if you have access to this type of wood, use it, because this is the stuff that makes it stand out from anybody else's pieces. And they're going to sell a lot faster if you have a top that just is just going to speak to any person looking for something that's going to be more of that statement piece. They're going to be able to see something that they're not going to traditionally find in any big box store. So here's the final piece. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And I just want to thank you guys for being as active and subscribing. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, leave a like, comment. Let me know what you guys would like to see in the future. This is something that, again, I hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully we'll see you all in the next one.